Our next topic that we will be studying is blood. Blood is the river of life that surges within us. It transports everything that must be carried from one place to another within the body through blood vessels. In this chapter, we'll consider the composition and function of this life-sustaining fluid. Blood is unique. It is the only fluid tissue in the body. Although blood appears to be a thick liquid underneath the microscope, we see that it contains both solid and liquid components. Essentially, blood is a complex connective tissue in which living blood cells, the formed elements, are suspended in a non-living fluid matrix, called plasma. If a sample of blood is spun in a centrifuge, the formed elements, being heavier, are packed down by centrifugal force, and the plasma rises to the top. Most of the reddish mass at the top of the tube will be erythrocytes, or red blood cells, the formed elements that function in oxygen transport. The thin, barely visible white layer, called the buffy coat, is at the junction between the erythrocytes and the plasma. This layer contains the remaining formed elements, the white blood cells and the platelets. Now, white blood cells and platelets contribute less than 1%, and plasma makes up most of the remaining 55% of whole blood. Here you can see what it looks like after it has gone through the centrifuge and all of the composition of blood. In this diagram, we see the different compositions of the formed elements. Now, blood is a sticky, opaque fluid with a characteristic metallic taste. Depending on the amount of oxygen it is carrying, the color of blood varies from scarlet to a dull red. Blood is heavier than water and about 5 times thicker due to its formed elements. Blood is slightly alkaline and its temperature is always slightly higher than body temperature. Blood accounts for approximately 8% of body weight, and its volume in healthy men is anywhere from 5 to 6 liters. Plasma, which is approximately 90% water, is the liquid part of blood, and there are over 100 different substances are dissolved in this straw-colored fluid. The composition of plasma varies continuously as cells remove or add substances to the blood. Here you can just see some of those substances: nutrients and salts and respiratory gases, hormones, plasma proteins, waste products. Man, that's a lot of stuff. Now, plasma proteins are the most abundant solutes in plasma. Except for antibodies and protein-based hormones, most plasma proteins are made by the liver. The plasma proteins serve a variety of functions. For instance, albumin acts as a carrier to shuttle certain molecules through circulation. It's also an important blood buffer, and it contributes to the osmotic pressure of blood, which acts to keep water into the bloodstream. Now, clotting proteins help stem blood loss when a blood vessel is injured, and antibodies help protect the body from pathogens. Now, when blood proteins drop to undesirable levels, the liver is stimulated to make more proteins, and when the blood starts to become too acid or too basic, both the respiratory system and the kidneys are called into action to restore it to its normal pH range. Now, we have already stated that the formed elements include the erythrocytes, the leukocytes, and the platelets. We will go into more detail of each in the next few slides. What we can see here is that most of the cells in this view are erythrocytes, the red blood cells. There are also 2 kinds of leukocytes, which are the white blood cells. And note that we can also see the platelets, those little bitty purple dots. Now, these next 2 slides show all the characteristics of the formed elements found in blood. The erythrocytes, or red blood cells, function primarily to ferry oxygen and blood to all cells of the body. Red blood cells differ from other body cells because they are anucleated, that is, they lack a nucleus. They also contain very few organelles, and basically they are just huge bags of hemoglobin molecules. Now, hemoglobin is an iron-bearing protein that transports the bulk of the oxygen that is carried by the blood. The more hemoglobin molecules the red blood cells contain, the more oxygen they will be able to carry. Now, a single red blood cell contains 250 million hemoglobin molecules. So each of these tiny cells can carry about 1 billion, yes, I said that, 1 billion molecules of oxygen. Now, what are the key points of this particular chapter? Let's take a look. What type of tissue is blood and what makes blood so unique? What makes up the form elements? What makes up plasma? Which body organ plays the main role in producing blood proteins? What determines whether blood is bright red or dull red? What are the characteristics of erythrocytes? And what makes hemoglobin so important? Well, here ends the first part of blood. We will continue on with the rest of this in the next few lectures.